In My Hero Academia, Deku must have a final and secret hidden quirk that none of the One-For-All users know about. The ability to steal other people's quirks. And Boku no Hero Academia has already provided plenty of evidence that this is indeed the case. And I will prove it to you. The quirk number 0, All for One. If you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video. Let's go! In order for us to understand why Deku can steal quirks, we must first take a closer look and compare One for All and All for One. The All for One quirk allows the user to steal other people's quirks and give them to other people. When All for One transferred his own quirk to Shigaraki, he himself became a vestige within Shigaraki. That's very similar to how One for All works, with the difference that All for One is always the only vestige associated with the current All for One user, even if Shigaraki were to transfer the All for One quirk to someone else. There's no official explanation for this phenomenon, but considering how One for All works, there's only one possibility. The reason for this must be that All for One does not have the stockpiling quirk, one of the two quirks that created One for All, and therefore cannot store other vestiges. The stockpiling quirk allows One for All to store and pass on the quirks of the current users along with their vestige. The vestiges of One for All are thus all integrated into One for All itself, which results in Deku being able to communicate with previous users, either in a realm or sometimes even in the real world, while in this case only the One for All vestiges can see the manifested vestiges. Here, however, there is an exception, All for One. All for One was not only able to sense the presence of his younger brother, but he was also able to create a shared realm that allowed the vestiges of One for All and All for One to interact with each other. This is something that should not be possible, but the shared realm itself does not prove anything specific. It does suggest that both quirks, All for One and One for All, function in the same way, but that's not enough to assume that Deku also has the same ability as All for One to steal quirks. And now comes the interesting part, something that was only recently revealed. All for One was not only able to sense the presence of his brother and share a realm with One for All, but also to see the vestige of the first and second user of One for All in the real world, when they both manifested to communicate with Deku during the battle against Shigaraki and All for One. But in this fight, they could communicate not only with Deku, but also All for One. This is actually something that only One for All vestiges should be able to do. It's almost as if All for One is somehow connected to One for All itself, and thus is perhaps a vestige of One for All. If that is the case, then there must be an explanation for it. At some point, All for One had to have somehow come into contact with One for All to become part of it. And the only time All for One was ever in contact with One for All was when he gave Yoichi the stockpiling quirk, that is, the essence of One for All, which then merged with Yoichi's transfer quirk to create One for All. So it can only have something to do with the stockpiling quirk. By the way, if you are old enough, drink every time I say stockpiling. Good luck.
2 shots of vodka.
But what is the stockpiling quirk, and why is it the reason that All for One could now be part of One for All without knowing it? As if All for One is itself user 0, so to speak, because his quirk and vestige was part of the stockpiling quirk before it evolved into One for All. So not only was the stockpiling quirk the essence of One for All, but also everything the stockpiling quirk had already stored. Even if the stored itself had no influence on the creation of One for All, it was still part of it. We just can't ignore the abilities of the stockpiling quirk just because it will then mean that All for One is part of One for All, and that some people just wouldn't like it. Feelings don't matter in logic. The fact is that either All for One is quirk 0 of One for All, or it's a plot hole. Or Horikoshi has a good explanation for why All for One was never transferred along with the stockpiling quirk. But why do I assume the stockpiling quirk is the reason that quirks can be saved, and why does it mean that All for One became a part of the stockpiling quirk, even before it evolved into One for All? To understand the ability of the stockpiling quirk, we need to separate all 3 components, save power, store quirks, and transfer, from One for All and assign them to the 2 quirks that originally created One for All, the stockpiling quirk and the transfer quirk. First, the ability to save power within the quirk. Obviously, this ability belongs to the stockpiling quirk. The second component is the ability to transfer the entire thing as one quirk to the next user. This, of course, as the name implies, is the transfer quirk that Yoichi was born with. And the third and final component is the ability to store quirks and vestiges, which is the essence that made One For All what it really is. So the reason why Deku can use all the quirks and even communicate with the vestiges. Obviously it has nothing to do with transfer, so it must also be part of the stockpiling quirk. So the stockpiling quirk must have always had two components: saving power and storing quirks together with the vestiges. And the reason why the vestige of the original owner of the stockpiling quirk is not itself part of the vestiges is that the stockpiling quirk does not stockpile itself. That's not how it works. But what about the All For One quirk? If this theory is correct, All For One must have transferred a copy of his own quirk to Yoichi without knowing it. He himself stole the stockpiling quirk from someone. At the moment, All For One stole this quirk from the original owner. The two components, save power and store quirk, were already activated, and thus One For All was born not at the moment Yoichi received the stockpiling quirk, but at the moment All For One stole it. And the effect of the stockpiling quirk was used for the first time. One For All was born with Yoichi only in the sense that it is a counterpart to All For One and lives to defeat All For One, which created, for example, the restriction that All For One cannot steal One For All. So at the moment Yoichi received the stockpiling quirk, it must have already stored the vestige and the quirk of All For One. If that's true, then where's the vestige of All For One anyway? Perhaps it cannot be seen because the One For All quirk, as just explained, protects the One For All users from the evil influence of All For One. Maybe All For One's vestige is behind such a locked door, as we have seen many times in the realm of One For All. These doors represent quirks that have not yet been unlocked. This would be a good explanation. And the reason why All For One does not know that he himself has a vestige inside One For All could be based on the same reason why All Might never knew that he too has a vestige. All Might's vestige is separate from the existence of the real All Might, although his vestige knows everything that the living All Might does and thinks in the real world. The other way around is not the case, which is why All Might himself never knew he had a vestige. However, All Might was able to sense all vestiges inside Deku when he came into close contact with him, which proves that previous users never lose connection with One For All. If you reflect this to All For One, he could also have a vestige inside One For All, which is aware of the existence of the real All For One in the real world, but not the other way around. And just like All Might, All For One can also sense the vestiges if he gets close enough to Deku, as we have seen. So the only reason why he can't sense his own vestige could be because it was sealed behind such a door that prevents All For One from interfering with One For All. In this case, Deku has to open this door and face All For One inside him so that he can use the All For One quirk. With this, he will be able to take away All For One forever, and consequently defeat All For One even if All For One becomes immortal due to the transformation into the Ultimate Demon Lord. What do you think of this My Hero Academia theory? Do you think Deku can use the All For One quirk? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this theory, please leave a like. It helps us a lot to continue the My Hero Academia content on this channel. And if you want to see more My Hero Academia videos, subscribe with the notification bell activated so that you don't miss any new Boku no Hero Academia video. We do weekly My Hero Academia theories and chapter reviews. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye!